So this morning we're going to run through our P6-Scrubber tool. I'm Nicole Jardin, joining you from Calgary, and I'm the founder and CEO of Emerald. And with me today doing the heavy lifting is Sue Familia, joining us from Wyoming. She will actually show you the software in action, so it'll give you a good chance to get a feel for how the tool works. So let me explain sort of where P6-Scrubber started from. So there's some common struggles that we find people face. And one of them is when you're in an extended team and your team is using P6 and they're not necessarily on the same database. So now you get into a situation where you have to import XERs or XMLs. You may even be importing Microsoft project files. So now you start to have to deal with different data and different systems coming into your system. And what that really does is it starts to pollute your P6 environment. And that can be just a pain in the neck. You know, you've got a lot of extra junk, but it also could actually be clashing. So you could have colliding data, which starts to impact the schedule outputs and also impact your reports, etc. So we built P6-Scrubber to help stop those problems. Now, part of our consulting business was cleaning up these sorts of databases. And we just felt, you know, this is not the best, and there's got to be a better way. So that's partly why we created P6-Scrubber. Now, we also have clients who have certain specifications that they're expecting, and they wanted to know whether some of these specifications were being followed in advance. And so this tool helps with that process as well, because you're going to see Sue will show you that you can rename, you can remap, you can also just scrub entirely pieces of data that you don't want to bring in. Okay, so it gives you a lot more control. So you don't have to do the cleanup afterwards, which is much more time consuming than keeping it out of your database in the first place. So that's really how P6-Scrubber kind of came to be. So let me ask you a quick question. I'll start with a quick poll. How does your team deal with outside P6 projects? Do you scrub projects in a cleaning database? So quite a few of our clients have that. They've got a separate database. Some people go into the XER and change it, which you're not supposed to do. You're violating your license if you mess it up. Do you just import them and then clean them up in the database you've got? Okay, so those are sort of the things that we've seen as typical. Modifying the XER in place, we saw one group actually corrupt their whole database because they changed the word global, typed it wrong. Okay, so it came in wrong and it messed things up. So there's a lot of dangers to those things. So rather than having to live with those strategies, that's sort of how we brought P6-Scrubber, how it came to be. So let me ask one other quick question. How much time do you think that you spend cleaning up your database? Now, of course, this totally depends. So we have clients that import over 50 projects every month. Okay, so that of course means a lot more cleanup than someone who maybe imports 1 or 2 projects each month. So it's going to depend completely on your particular environment and how much importing you do. Okay, but it's always interesting to see what people are dealing with. And some of you may have got our email at the beginning of the year. We try and share all these statistics that we gather over the year. So it's always interesting to see. And you can go to our website. We do have the statistics on the pages of the different software tools as well. Okay, so really it comes down to keeping your system clean, and there's a lot of benefits to having a tool that will pre-scrub. Now, we talk a lot about pre-cleaning. The other thing, if you're a contractor, you may not want to send all of your data out with the XER that you're putting out. Okay, so there's a benefit as a contractor to pre-scrub before you give the XER. So it's on the export that you're making. You take the export, then you run it through Scrubber, then you have an XER that you can hand over to the engineering firm or the client that you're working for, and then you can remove things that you don't need to share. Okay, so if you're on a lump sum contract, for example, you likely don't need to share your resource loading. Okay, but rather than have another project where you have to keep cleaning it out, excuse me, every time, you can just use P6-Scrubber to do that. Okay, so much easier, much less work, and much more repeatable for your team. Okay, so you can look at it from both perspectives, and the tool works just as well. Okay, so let me run through generally how the tool works, and Sue will show you in action. So what you essentially do is you create a scrubbing definition, sort of like what you do when you make a layout. Okay, similar sort of idea. The definition can be pre-built without an XER. Okay, so we've got that capability. Or you can bring in an XER for the first time and create the definition. Okay, so you can work on it whichever way you wish. Then, of course, you select the file. Now, you can select one XER or you can select multiple. Okay, so again, depending on how you're working it. If you have one contractor send you multiple files each month, you can have the definition preset and you can bring all the files in at once. Okay, so totally up to you depending on how you receive the data. Now, then we check the data. Now, we clean some of the things that have been irritants, if you will, straggler data, the POBS and the risk types. The latest versions are getting better. They don't have those problems with them. But if you're still on an older version, those straggler things do exist. It checks data like calendars, which is a big one, right? We want to make sure our calendars are clean. It'll check the fundamentals, so user-defined fields at all levels, so projects, activities, resources, WBS, etc. It will check the codes at all those levels. It'll check cost codes, and then you're going to be able to do what you want with them. Okay, so we've got the ability to scrub, meaning don't bring it in, rename it. Okay, so bring it in but give it a different name so that your coding structures stay nice and tidy, or remap it so you can merge codes together. Okay, so you've got a lot of nice functionality, and Sue's going to show it to you in detail. And once you set up that scrubbing definition, it will keep using it. Okay, so it's going to be easier and easier each time you get an import or an XER to do the scrubbing. And then you can see the results of what you're going to get. And we can even allow you to do some validations. So validate some naming conventions. Okay. Once you've got what you want and you're comfortable with it, you can then import it in, and she will show that to you in detail. That's how simple this is. Okay, so the way that we sell this tool, it's a subscription, and it's a subscription to a pack of scrubs. And a scrub is each project that it's scrubbing in an XER counts as a scrub. So that's how we sell it. So you could deploy your subscription to 50 schedulers. If you have 50 projects that you've got in the scrubbing package, you can share them as you wish. And once you're at the limit, you just buy some more scrubs and off you go. Okay. Now, if you do a lot of this, it may make more sense to buy one of our larger packages. So we've got standalone, standard, professional, and corporate. And they're just different levels of packaging. And if you buy more, you get what they cost less per scrub. That's how we sell the tool. So I'll turn it over to Sue and let her show you in detail how this works. I'm just switching over to you, Sue.
Okay.
It's coming your way now.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay, okay, good. So as she's showing it to you, if you do have questions, throw them in the question room and I'll tackle them and or we'll get Sue to show you how whatever you're questioning works. Okay.
All right. Thank you, Nicole. First of all, I want to show you some of the issues that you can run into when you are importing a file um, that has additional data in it that you might not necessarily want to land where it just is going to land wherever, um, and how it can kind of pollute up your database. So first of all, let's take a look at resources. So when you import resources, you have, a lot of times we have some sort of structure that we put our resources into, um, uh, with a header, a parent, and then the resources underneath it. However, if you import without landing them somewhere and giving it a place to go, you see, like I have here in this database that's not very clean. I've got just some of these straggler resources that are just lined up at the bottom of my resource dictionary. And when you import in, this is what happens with your resources. Um, and we have the functionality with P6-Scrubber to actually land those in a particular parent. So it'll help keep your resources clean. If I go into, let's say, calendars, and I have all of my global calendars here, you can see that things have been imported in, and I have just a huge amount of calendars that have been imported in. And in a lot of cases, I can see that these are calendars that probably belong to a specific company or contractor, maybe, when they were imported in. And because they were at the global level at when I imported, it actually came into my global calendars, which you don't necessarily want to have every calendar you have in your or in your global calendars. These are usually reserved for those ones that you're going to use all the time, such as your standard 5 day, etc. Now, another thing is that when you import a calendar, if you happen to have a calendar at your global level and it's importing at your global level that is that has the same name as a calendar that's being imported in. So, for example, on our standard 5 day work week, you can see I've got several here. Um, what happens is if you have another calendar named the same as in the XER, is that calendar will overwrite the definition of the calendar that you already have in your P6 environment. So, this could cause some problems. For your own schedules that have that calendar applied. So it could change your dates when you schedule, things like that. So being able to control those calendars is really a huge part of keeping that your database clean and your global calendars in this case. Another example I have is activity codes. So a lot of people have activity codes at the global level. And if I go in and take a look at the activity codes that I have, I can see again, I just have a whole lot of activity codes that are coming in at the global level. And I don't necessarily need all these in my database at the global level. So again, I've got some that are prefixed that are saying that these have come in with an import at the global level, not necessarily ones that I'm going to use in my database, but they're still important to the project that I'm importing. So we have the ability to push those activity codes down to a project level to kind of keep your global codes and calendars clean and tidy so that they are pertinent to your business and not necessarily to the business of the company that you're importing that from. So, just a few things as to how uh, this can affect your database. So, while I go in and look at the tool itself, I'm just going to log into um, the database that I'm going to show you my imports in. So with P6-Scrubber, we are able to point it at several different databases. I'm going to show you the live version today. We do have a version that is standalone that you don't have to have connected to a database, but really we've found that most of our clients want to compare what's in their database to what is actually uh, coming in and see if maybe they want to allow it to come in or something like that. So I'm going to go ahead and sign in, and we have our home page here. So when you are scrubbing, we have broken it down into different categories. And so you can that you're working with your project and WBS data, your activities data, etc. Um, so if I go and I look at some of these, and I wanted to set up a definition that is not necessarily that I want to run on my XER or my XML. Um, I can do this from scratch, which will allow me to go in and enable these. These are codes. These are activity codes. I'm under the activity area and in codes. I can first, I need to enable this particular module. What this does is tells P6-Scrubber that I actually want to run this on my XCR when I scrub it. Now, with most of the codes, not all, or with all of the codes and all of the UDFs, we have this option here that I can scrub extra code types or whatever the data item is. What this indicates is that anything additional to what I define down in my table here is going to be removed from my XCR if it's not defined. If I'm adding a definition from scratch, what I can do is I'm going to define an activity code. So I'm going to tell it I want to add it. It's going to tell me I have a new one coming in here, and I could um, type in whatever I needed. And as I go, P6-Scrubber is going to kind of coach me on whether it's missing data or not. So I have a warning here, and it tells me I have to select an action. So this means, okay, what do I want to do with this code when it's encountered? Um, I'm just going to visit these two other columns as I get over there. So scope is going to be what level it should look at it for it at. So in this case, let's say this is a global code. And if it were a project code, I could put the project ID in there as well. Now my action is going to be whether I want to remove this or whether I want to keep it. So in this case, I do want to keep it. And I because I'm selected or I have selected a database to connect this to, I can take a look at what I have in my database at this point. So I can see that I have my new code type name cannot be blank. So I'm going to go in here and let's say I want to look at anything that has to do with vendor. Well, I actually want to remap this to an SCR vendor. Now it's going to indicate to me over here whether it matches a piece of, or in this case, an activity code at the global level in P6. So it's gonna let me know it's there or it's not. Now I also have another option with activity codes at the global level is that, do I want to roll this down? Maybe I don't want vendor coming in at my global level, but I do want it to come in at the project level. I can simply click this open, check mark it, and it's going to roll that code down to the project level for me. Now, along with codes, we have a dictionary that goes along with that. So if I click this little plus after I've set up my code, I have a dictionary area that expands. And I have that same option whether to scrub those extra dictionary values or not that I have defined. Um, I can also just start adding dictionary values. However, if you're creating from scratch, a lot of time you have large dictionaries or dictionaries that you have a list of. So we've enabled this bulk edit here. So when I can do my bulk edit, I can open this up. And let's say I want to grab the dictionary. I'm not connected to P6, and I want to grab the dictionary for that particular uh, activity code. So what I can do is I can go over into P6. I can find the code that I want to grab, and then I can copy this and I can take it back over to P6-Scrubber and I can paste it. So I can bring this in from an Excel spreadsheet, from P6 itself, from a list, whatever, wherever I have those codes. Now, when I bring them in from P6, I actually get this color column that is there, and I don't need that color column. So I can choose to remove that column. And I also have a header that comes in. So I can choose to remove the header as well. And then I can apply this, and it's going to give me all of my information that comes in. And then I can select an action, the value, the description, etc. So we've tried to make it a little easier for those that are building out definitions without the benefit of being connected to their database. Now, another way, and I'm going to go into more of these topics in depth after I import a file that I actually want to uh, scrub, that I want to look at, see what's in there, and decide how to handle that data. So I'm just going to remove my code that I put here, and I'm going to import a file that I'm going to scrub or that I want to make a definition towards. So I can grab that file. In this case, it's an XER, but I could use an XML and I also could use a Microsoft project file. So I'm going to use an XCR and I'm going to open it up and I'm going to import that file. And what that's going to do is P6-Scrubber is going to go out, it's going to read that file, and it's going to put those pieces of data in each area where it has data. So first of all, let's look at the project codes. So in project codes, again, it's going to be much like activity codes. I can see that I've got, I need to enable this. I can decide whether these ones that I have defined down here, whether I want any additional codes to come in. So I can go ahead and put that in there if I want to. And then I can decide with each code, project code, what I want to do with it. So let's say I want to keep my district code here. My client type, I don't really need that, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to scrub that out. Um, I don't need my client either, so I can scrub that out. And then maybe on my type of schedule here, maybe I don't have. Um, I have something else that I want to map that to. So right now I can see it matches in P6, but maybe I want to do something else with it. So I could start typing it in and I could decide, okay, I want to remap this actually to this SCR schedule type. Now, if I click the plus button, next to these, I'm going to find that I have my values here. And let's say on my district value that I have codes that are coming in, and I have this DIST5 that's here, but that's not what I want to do with that. Actually, I have a value called D5 in my database. So I can go and I can look up that value and I want to remap it to that D5. It's going to tell me it matches, of course. If it doesn't match, it's going to give me a red X. And then I can decide whether I want that to come in or whether I wanted uh, to keep it. I could also decide what values. So if I decide, okay, all that can come in is D5, I could scrub out my extra dictionary values. For user defined fields, um, I have similar options. So I have my submitted project ID that came in, my submitted file name, etc. It's going to give me my data type that this is, and it's going to give me the subject area where it is defined. So let's say I don't want any WBS codes to come in. I could simply scrub the one that's coming in, and I could also say that I don't want any other WBS user-defined fields to come in as well. Now, in this case, let's say I had a user-defined field that came in, and I'm trying to find one that I'm not getting. What am I getting here that is not going well? Trying to find one that's going to give me a red X. Okay, so I'm not getting a red X, but I wanted to give you an example of as to when it doesn't find what it needs. I should have a red X here, and I think it's because I imported it and it was already correct. But it's going to give me that red X. Now, if I had one that I wanted to come in and it had a red X on it, I could click in this matches P6 area and it's going to give me a checkbox so that if it's not in my database, I have to validate that yes, I do want it to come in. And so I would check the check mark, it would give me a blue star here. Then I could go in and I can go and take a look at all the rest of those fields that I maybe want to touch. So I've got, of course, my uh, activity codes here. I've got and I can see my project as well as my global. I've got my user defined fields, and under projects, I've got my activity, expense, step, issue, and risk. So I can choose individually what subject area I want to allow user defined fields to come in at. And then I get down to my resources. So with my resources, I have a number of resources coming in, and I can remap these as well. So maybe I want to come in and I want to remap a couple of resources to ones that I have already set up for my project. So I could go ahead and I could remap those. And I also have the option additionally up here in this resources area where I could go and I can decide what parent I want to land these resources under. So I want to put these under my Scrubber resources. So I can choose that. It's going to go out, it's going to uh, create those resources that I have in this file. Let me just collapse this down. All these resources, and they're going to land in that resource tree when I import the file. Codes and user-defined fields for resources work in the same manner as project and activities. I have the calendar area. So this is where I can control what calendars are coming in from my global from the global calendar area. So I would say in most cases, you're going to want to roll these all down. And I'm going to show you an easier way as well to roll these down if you have a whole bunch of calendars. So now that I've indicated that these are going to roll down, they're going to, P6 Scrubber is going to take them from the global area or global uh, level, and it's going to push it down to my project level. So it's going to maintain that calendar, but instead of being a global calendar, it's going to be a project calendar. So nothing is going to change in the way of my scheduling or anything, because I have put them down at the project level. If I want to choose to roll down any additional global calendars that are not defined, I can check the check mark here. Now, we had a client who wanted to see what project calendars were coming in with from their contractors. So they asked us to add this area in to our calendar area so they could actually see prior to importing, um, what calendars were there. And they wanted to do this because they had some specifications that said you were going to use these calendars in the project at the project level. So they wanted to be able to check that before they even imported it so they could maybe give some feedback to their contractor if they weren't there. We also have the ability to remap our resource calendars. So in a case where you already had a resource calendar set up, that you wanted to remap it to, you can certainly remap your resource calendar as well. Now, roles work much the same way as resources. I have the ability to land them in a parent. So I could go in and say I want them to come into that scrubber role parent tree. And here we go. I have some red X's here. I can see what is coming in the way of my roles. So the ones that have come in that don't have a match in P6 are going to give me some uh, indicators. So if I have a yellow indicator and I hover, it's going to let me know what it's finding with this. So in this case, it doesn't have a value that matches in my database right now. So I could either choose to remap that value, or if I want to allow that value to come in as is, I can go to my matches P6 area and I can say, okay, that's going to tell P6 Scrubber that yes, I have looked at this data and I do want to allow it to come in. So I can go down and I can bring these all in to that as new values. So it's going to ask you and it's going to have you look at each piece of data and validate it and make sure that you are telling it what you want to do with that piece of data when it scrubs it. So it's not going to leave any stragglers out there. Now with cost accounts, we've got essentially this, it works the same as user defined fields. I can choose to keep them or remove them. I could remap them, and I can see whether they are matching in my P6 database. I also have the ability to uh, assign an OBS or responsible manager for this project. So, the advantage to this is that you aren't going to bring in any additional OBS structure to your Primavera database. You have what you want in there, and you don't necessarily want a bunch of garbage to come in. So, what this allows you to do is to go and select what responsible manager you want to assign from your database into P6, or that's already in P6. So, I could choose a responsible manager and it's going to go out, it's going to assign that responsible manager for this project. So I won't have to do it after I've imported it. And it's not going to bring in a bunch of extra OBS elements as I'm importing all these projects. Now, I mentioned that I had an easier way to roll down calendars. Well, not only do I have an easier way to roll down calendars, but if I wanted to do some just kind of blanket handling of my data items, I have this area called Simple Scrub. And what Simple Scrub will do is allow you to prefix all of those data items. I could choose to not import any of those data items, um, and I can handle them right here. So if I go to my Simple Scrub, and I can use this hand in hand with these other modules up here. So let's say, for instance, in my project type code, I wanted to prefix all of these with an SCR. And with each one of my prefixes, I actually want a dash to come after them every time I add a prefix, no matter what it is. So I can go in and I can say, okay, for all of my prefixes, I want a common separator of a dash. So I can choose how to handle that. So let's say I don't want any resource code types or role types to come in. I can certainly tell it not to import any of them. In the case of my activity codes and my global calendars, I have the option to roll all of them down to the project level. So I could handle all of them right here if I choose that I'm going to roll each one of them down, no matter what they are. And so I could just, click that. If I wanted to prefix it at the same time, I certainly could do that as well. So I can handle um, data in a blanket type manner in this area here. So once I have my definition that is out there, I've decided how I want to handle each piece of my data. And I want to run the scrub and I want to keep this definition for other files that come in from this contractor or this client. I would go in and I would save my definition. So I would click my save and load definitions and I would choose to save as. What this is going to allow me to do is save this definition so that I can use it again and again. So I can set it up once and I can use it and don't have to define that every single time. So I'm just going to give it a name. I'm just going to put webinar example. And I could add some notes about this that would be visible when I am choosing this again. And I also have 3 levels in which I can save this at. I can save it personally just for my use. I could choose a team that I want to share it with. So I can set up my users to belong to a team. So let's say you're working on a particular project, and this definition is for that project, and this certain team is going to work on that project. I can define a team, and I can assign it to that team, and so every team member would be able to then use it. Now, if I am an administrator of P6-Scrubber, I could also choose to save this at the global level. So I could allow all the users in my P6-Scrubber application to use this. Now, in my case, I'm just going to use it for my personal. And so when I apply, it's going to go out and it's going to let me know that it is saved successfully. So that definition is saved. And I can also see that I now have my definition up here in the green bar at the top, where it's telling me what definition I have actually applied at this point. Now, what happens when I have my definition and I want to just use it? It's already been defined, it's been saved, and I'm coming in and I'm coming to scrub files. I could use it right now just to scrub a file, but let's say I've come in brand new, I've already set up this definition, and I want to use it again. To use a definition, I go down into my save and load definitions, and I can choose the definition I want to use, and then I can tell it to load. So I can see it's also come up here where I have my items that have been predefined. And you can see where I've changed a few things in here. So it is a new definition. And then I'm ready to scrub the files. So to scrub the file, I go down into the scrub file area and I can browse to where I have my projects or project or projects. So I could even take several projects and use this same definition to scrub it. Then I can open it and see where it's lined up here. I've got two projects and process my files against the definition that I had loaded. Now it's going to go out, it's going to scrub each file, in this case individually, and then I can go and I have it's telling me it's done because I have the ability to download the results, see some details, or view the report. Now, if this is the first time I've run this definition, and I want to make sure that this definition is doing what I want it to. Or if you just want to view your file, make sure that the changes that were made according to that definition, that you've handled everything you need to. I can view a report here. The report's going to come in and it's going to show me what exactly happened during that scrub. So at the top here, I've got kind of an overall accounting of what's happened with each data item, whether it's cleaned or whether it was clean, no changes were made, or whether it was not clean and some sort of changes were made. And it's going to give me kind of an accounting of what happened with each one. Now, what I can do is I can scroll down into the base of my project and see that I've got some what happened individually with each data item. So in the case of my project code type dictionary and my validation on those dictionaries, I have some gray boxes that are telling me that this is what I had defined. Now, as I scroll down, it's going to give me the results when that definition was applied. So on my client, in this one, I didn't scrub anything, but I did have a dictionary change on my district. So I have my district dictionary that is here, and I can see where I took that DIST5 and I remapped it to D5, and it's actually telling me, yes, it was remapped. So I could go down and I can look individually with each one of these what I did here or what was happening when it was scrubbed. So I scrubbed out my WBS cost performance and I have remapped the submittal date to submitted date. So I could go down and check each one of these. Now, when I'm satisfied, I can download my results for this file. If I wasn't satisfied, I could go back, adjust my definition, correct it to how I want it to handle those pieces, and then rerun. But in my case, I'm good. I want to download those results. So when I download, I'm going to get a zip file, and I'm going to get two files with this. When I get the two files, I'm not only going to get my cleaned file, in this case, my clean XER, that's going to be appended with the date and time that it was scrubbed, but I'm also going to get an HTML copy of the report that we just looked at. So if I wanted to give some feedback to maybe one of my contractors, I had some specifications that weren't met, I can open up this report. I could copy and paste a piece of it. I could share the whole report, whatever, back to my client, my contractor, and give them some feedback immediately. So I don't have to. If I needed to go back to this, I have it. Now, once P6, it, the file is imported into P6. Let me just show you that really quickly. What is going to come in by default is some indicators showing me what has happened with my data. Was it scrubbed? A green is indicate that no, it was not. It was clean. Everything that I had defined matched up. In the case of a red, it's again going to say that some sort of change happened, whether that was a remap, whether it was a scrub, uh, that code was scrubbed out, a dictionary value was scrubbed out, etc. So I'm going to be able to see that right in P6. I'm also going to get a copy of my project or my report, so I can import that in as uh, a notebook, and I'm going to be able to see with this file when I ran Scrubber on it what happened. Now, this is important because you want to, like in the case of a claim or something like that, you can show them that you didn't change actually the numbers, the anything like that on it. All you did was remap or um, remove some of the data that was there. So this could be helpful in a claim situation to just show that you did not do anything to this file upon import that changed the actual dates, the quantities, anything like that in with it. Now, because P6 Scrubber is intended for you to keep your database clean, perhaps you don't want to bring in those data items such as indicators. Maybe you're never going to use these indicators. What you can choose to do is to turn this off, and that's in the general area here. I can choose to turn this off, and I wouldn't have indicators created for my file. I could also do the same thing in the case of a notebook. If I really didn't want that notebook to come in upon that import, I can choose to turn that off and save that with my definition. Now, another thing you might want to do, let's say you are a contractor and you are going to send this file out to your client, and you want to and let you're working with maybe the Oracle Cloud, and your export is actually at version 22. However, the person you're sending or the company you're sending this file to is actually only on 19. What you can do is you can demote the version of this file so that when they import it, they're going to be successful. So they can go at 19, you can roll it down to version 19.12, send it off to that company that uses 19.12, and then when they import it, they're going to be successful in that import because it's at the version that they need it in. Now, one thing I just want to touch on quickly is I didn't visit these ID and name areas. We'd have this ability in both the project and the activity IDs and names. This again was another request from a client that we were dealing with. They had a specific they had specifications essentially for their contractors to name their projects and their IDs according to a certain pattern. So they wanted to be able to take a look at this prior to importing the project. So in the case that you wanted to just do that validation, that comparison, this isn't going to change any information at all, but they were able to define a project ID pattern. So I can enable this, and in the case of either the ID or the name, I can set up a pattern that it's going to compare against. So I could do something simple like it contains, a starts, or an ends with. Or I can build out maybe a simple pattern. So perhaps on my pattern, I am looking for 2 letters. So I can go and say I want to do 2 letters. They are going to be uppercase. And then I am looking for 5 numbers. So I can go in, define I want to see 5 numbers, and then I want to see a dash. So I can put in that I want specific text as a dash and not a star, a dash. And then after that, I could have any any additional characters followed by that. But I do want to see those 2 letters, those 5 numbers, and a dash every time I take a look at an ID from this particular contractor. So then I can go any character, and 0 is going to indicate that I can have any number of characters after that. Now, while I'm building this out, we've given you a little area here where you can go in and you can test your pattern. So I have nothing there, so it's telling me it's not okay. It's red. It's not matching. But if I went out and chose, or I typed in the pattern, or the project ID that I want it to match, it's going to validate that for me. So um, you can also validate and check to see what those patterns are and if they are adhering to your specifications. So before I go and hand it back to Nicole, um, I just want to see if there are any questions that I need to address before I hand it back.
So there was one question, and I did answer it, but I don't know if you can show it more clearly. Do you have an XML or an MS project that you could open up? So
Oh,
the
sure.
question was, does this work with XERs only, or does it also do XML? So I just thought
Absolutely.
if we could show it, that would be good.
You bet. So, first of all, I'm going to go and I'm going to clear out all my data on this one. So, I'm going to go and I'm going to say new definition, which blanks out all of the data that I already have. And so it's going to give me some clean areas here. Now, I'm just going to go and I'm going to import. So let's say in the case of, let's just do a Microsoft project one. This is an XML and it's come from Microsoft project. When I choose that, I can actually choose to import it. With Microsoft project, I am not going to get the amount of information that I get, obviously, with an XML that's imported, or that has come from P6 itself, just because Microsoft project doesn't have the functionality. It doesn't have all of those fields and things like that that would come in with a P6 XML file. They do take a little bit longer to import just because they are in a different format, and it needs to translate them basically. But I can see that I have some project codes that came in, or I'm sorry, I have some user defined fields that came in, resources and calendars. So when I apply that and I go to my let's see, my user defined fields, they're all going to be at the activity level for Microsoft project. I can see where they're imported in. I can see whether they are matched in P6. I also have a new, looks like I've got a new indicator here. And so here, when I hover over it, it's telling me that it couldn't actually find that actual activity code, but it has something very close to it that it's finding. And that's what that little light bulb is. So when I go in here and I double click, I can see something that is very close to it. So I could choose to remap it or not. And then I could go in and also look at all of my uh, resources as well as my calendars and things like that. So I can see that I actually have a calendar at the project level. Again, nothing globally is going to come in with a Microsoft project. So yes, we can handle XMLs both from P6 as well as Microsoft project.
Okay, good. And then I'm not sure, but I feel like you might have jumped over units of measures. Did you show that to the group?
Ah, you're, you're right, I did. So with a unit of measure, in fact, let me apply one again so that we can see the units of measure in here. With units of measure, let's say I have a unit of measure that came in as something that we don't have defined, and instead of creating a whole bunch of random units of measure that mean the same thing, I could actually remap my units of measure. So in this case, if saying that if it comes in as this M3, I actually want to remap it to this one that's in my database, this M3 that's in my database. And we call that units of measure. So it can go out and it can handle those units of measure as well, and remap them so that I can keep my units of measure dictionary clean and tidy and only have one definition for each one of my units of measure.
Okay, I think that's it. I don't see any additional questions right now.
Okay, great. So I'll
Okay.
hand it back to you.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, and I will just do the wrap up. Okay, so Sue showed us the deep dive of how the tool works. Hopefully you got the idea of how easy it is. And once you've got the definition set up, you can reuse it. And of course, there may be changes each time you get an import. They may be adding codes, etc. So it gets easier and easier every time you run it, just to do a quick validation. And off you go. So it's very easy to use. That's the key thing that we're shooting for, was to make it easy to use. You don't need to be an expert P6 user to use the tool necessarily. And some of our clients do have some of the folks doing the pre-scrubbing, if you will, that are not P6 day-to-day P6 experts. Very configurable, as you saw, with a lot of good flagging to help the user see where the problems are so they can address them quickly. So this should keep your system clean. That's the key thing, is that now your P6 doesn't get all these extra things in it that you don't want, things that could also impact on your reporting. So a lot of our clients use our P6 Reporter tool, which snapshots data from your schedules, either automatically or you snapshot it in, and then they put that reporting data out to their corporate standard reporting tool, like a Power BI or Tableau or analytics, some sort of analytics tool like Business Objects, etc. Okay, so you don't want all that reporting that you're sending out to managers to be impacted. So that's another key thing here, is it keeps your system clean and helps make sure that the data you're putting out is accurate. Okay, so we definitely want to avoid any collisions on calendars and things like that. Okay, so hopefully you saw something that was of interest. If you're on this webinar, you're probably doing importing, and there can be challenges there. So this is one of our many tools. So I think we've got the best P6 toolkit out there. So take a look at our webinar schedule. We've got P6 Calculator coming up, P6 Reporter coming up, and other webinars that will give you a sneak peek at some of the other tools that could make your P6 user community happier with what they're doing on a day-to-day basis in the system. If you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out. You've got our different phone numbers. I think that Philippines number maybe is not right. So if you're in the Philippines or in Asia, go ahead and reach out to Donna. She's our regional manager there, and I'm just putting her email in the chat. And that's a better way to reach out. And then, of course, you got Sue's email there as well. So definitely reach out. Let us know if there's anything else we can do to help you on this. And I'll just close out with one quick poll thing that you can fill in if you wish. It's just, if you do want us to follow up, how would you like us to do that? Just so we're communicating with you in the most appropriate manner. And I think that's it for today. So thanks so much for joining us. We'll stop the webinar here.